Hi there, and welcome to the Half a Bubble Out podcast. Today, we're going to talk about measurements and marketing and making it easier for you to understand. Because the bottom line is, you'll make more money and be less frustrated, and you will stop wondering, am I wasting my money? Is this a place that's ever going to work? Well, we're going to talk about these things, and we're going to talk about the 4 principles that we've learned that make it way easier to understand and way more profitable for you. So let's jump in. As we've seen over the years running an agency, marketing is a phenomenal thing, but measuring the marketing isn't always easy. And working with a lot of different mediums and a lot of different clients, we've had plenty of challenges running the measurements and the metrics over the years and making sense of it, correct?
Oh, yeah. And isn't the old adage that people used to tease about in marketing, like 50% of all your marketing dollars are wasted? The trouble is knowing which 50%. That's the old joke.
Yes, I hated that.
Like, I
hated
too.
that joke.
I hate that joke, but that's how people feel.
Yeah, well, it's like, just tell me what it's going to be. Foolish. Well, and then the age of the internet came along and made all these promises.
Everything's measured down to the cent.
We can do that. And you know exactly what's going on. And you know exactly how it's going to work.
Yep.
What everybody forgets is that the complexity of measurement is meant to adjust or measure psychology. It's the psychology and action. It's what are people doing? And it's also needs to give us insight into why are they actually doing it.
Yeah, not just what they're doing, but why they're doing it.
So as we've grown, we've learned more and more, and we've been ahead of the curve of many companies because we have clients and we have to help. But I think it's always been something that it's always a frustrating thing. How are you going to articulate it? How are you going to do it? And today we're going to talk about the four key things that have made it so much easier for us, so much easier for our clients.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a powerful thing just that kind of overarches it and is true in anything, but very true in marketing metrics is you have to know what the questions are to get the right answers, right? So how you frame a question will frame the answer. And that becomes a very critical piece of how we approach marketing and metrics and all of that good stuff.
Well, it makes life so much more effective when you understand these things. It makes your marketing efforts more effective, and everybody likes to do something that's more effective. The other part is it actually helps you spend your money more wisely.
Yeah.
Stop wasting money in places, because that old quote, right, is half my money is being wasted.
I just don't know which half.
I don't know which half. Well, this is supposed to help with that even more, but you've got to become wise in the process. So there's 4 areas that are probably, before we get into the 4 areas that are what we learned and what are things that we teach, probably 4 mistakes that people make.
Yeah. Well, the first one is they just don't measure.
Yeah.
So you're just kind of throwing money at stuff, but you really don't have any effective way of measuring anything. So you don't know what's working and what's not.
I don't care. It's too much hassle.
Yeah.
I told so many different reasons why. Like, do you measure it? No, we should.
Right. Correct.
Why don't you? Well, and usually it boils down to I'm impatient and I don't want to take the time to do it.
Right.
Or
I don't want to build the system that would allow me to measure that.
Or I don't know how to.
Yeah.
When you really get down underneath, it's like, I don't know how, and it's frustrating. And I've tried to learn and I just move forward.
Well, then at the opposite extreme, you get the people who want to measure everything. And the struggle in that particular arena is really learning to separate out what can you measure that's actionable versus just gathering copious amounts of data that may or may not actually help you make decisions. So there's people who want to measure everything, and the time that takes and the amount of data that produces can kind of just crush you in terms of the ability to really decide, okay, what do I do out of any of this? Great information, but now what do I do? Yeah. So measuring everything is the opposite challenge to measuring nothing.
Yeah. The third thing that is a mistake, the third mistake people make is that they actually are measuring a bunch of stuff that's not actionable. They believe a metric is important. They want to have this thing, but then it's like, okay, well, if you knew that, how would that change your behavior? What are you going to do with it? I don't know. But
I want to know.
But I want to know. It's like, okay, that's fine. But if it's not actionable, there is a whole conversation going on of stop measuring things that aren't actionable and stop collecting data that maybe someday you'll be able to use or do something with or others. Companies have databases full of information that they don't overanalyze, or don't know how to find meaning out of.
Mhm.
And it's a disease of large companies. It's a disease of small companies.
Absolutely. And that kind of leads to the fourth mistake that people make is that they don't know how to listen to or understand the story that numbers and metrics and measurements are giving them.
Yeah.
So understanding the story behind the numbers is as critical as knowing what the numbers actually are.
Yeah.
So those are the four mistakes that people make that we've seen.
Okay, so let's walk into the four things that are really the things that helped us grow, help our clients grow. And the first lesson is you have to know what actions move people from being strangers to raving fans.
Mm.
You have to understand in marketing, when you're measuring marketing, you have to actually understand the process of how do I take a stranger, introduce them to our company or our brand, and then move them along the sales process till they purchase. And then if you're a company that's selling more than one product, how you get them to buy other products. If you're selling the same thing, but over and over again, like toilet paper, how do you get them to keep coming back and buying your brand as opposed to buying another brand? And the reason that's important is now you're going, okay, depending on where we are in the country, our society, or community, the type of business we have, or whatever, you have to understand what are going to be the actions they're going to take.
Right. And different phases of the journey have different things that are being measured, right?
So we use an 8-step model, right?
Mm-hmm.
The first step of the model has always been making people aware. How do I know how many people are aware? Well, I can do that. I can use ads, right? Mm-hmm. We use ads on a regular basis.
Sure.
From that, you can go, okay, are they engaged? Well, I can tell you how many impressions the ad got. We can tell you how many impressions that an ad on Google or on Facebook got. But if they click and they come to our website, right, we've got an impression. And so when we walk through that, all of a sudden you're like, oh, I'm measuring different things. How do I measure their engagement versus awareness? And why am I measuring those things? So understanding the process, that stage for us is helpful. The second thing is you need to choose the metrics that actually measure those actions.
Right.
So it kind of builds on what we're talking about.
Exactly.
When we're talking to a client about success, what are the things that you've seen that are important numbers to tell them and things that they ask about that are not important?
Such a broad and varied question. I mean, I think, going back to what we said when we were talking about the mistakes, the first thing is deciding together, what is it that we're going to actually measure and why, right? And at each stage. So if you're doing an awareness campaign, even digital awareness, right? Whether you're doing it on Google or Facebook or you're streaming ads or whatever, impressions actually matter. Are you getting enough impressions? Are the same people seeing that thing over and over again, right? When you're starting to look at measuring engagement, then it matters how many people are actually clicking on and coming to your website, that kind of thing. So understanding what metrics matter at what stage of that journey is a really important thing to articulate and make sure that you're on the same page as a company about what it is that you're looking for and measuring. Like what actually measures the thing that matters in this particular phase of their journey.
Yeah. And that context, and then knowing the second part of that of what can I do with it?
Mm-hmm.
How do I influence that? How do I change it?
Right.
One of the things that seems interesting is when we as human beings have a simple understanding of a measurement, we know like RBIs, runs batted in.
Sorry, I was in the digital world and it took me a second.
I'm moving to baseball.
You moved to baseball. I gotcha.
Right?
I gotcha.
Runs batted in. Okay, great. That's a number that is a metric of, wow, that person they've hit the ball enough. They've helped people score. But then you turn around and you go, okay, well, I know that number. How do I change it? How would somebody go about helping a baseball player increase their RBIs or decrease their RBIs? It's a little.
You never want to decrease the RBIs.
Well, no. but what does decrease the RBIs?
Bad batting. Striking out.
Bad. So that's a little bit more abstract than how many hits times at bat do they get on base.
Yeah.
What does that look like?
Yeah.
When you get into digital world, when somebody goes to awareness, like, oh, hey, we have this many people clicking through on the ad, so we have a click-through rate. Is our click-through rate good or bad? And that would tell us if the ad itself is a good ad or not.
Mm-hmm.
It also tells us if it's in front of the right people or not. It might be a great ad, and it's not in front of the right people yet.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a couple of different things that could tell us, and you got to kind of test those and go, what's happening? How do you understand that? Once they come to the website, how do we know, are they engaged, and how engaged are they? What does that look like?
Yep.
And it's different for a website company, an e-commerce company, than it is for a brick and mortar.
Exactly. Well, and understanding what's average in your industry. Because if you don't understand those things, your ad could be doing brilliantly based on industry standards, and it doesn't look good enough to you.
Yeah.
And you pull it. Well, and that's a mistake.
Yeah.
Right. So understanding like what are we measuring against and what actually is happening across this industry that I am playing in, so that I understand, okay, no, it's not so bad.
Yeah. And so we're in that place of what metrics to choose. The third thing is you need to understand that different marketing approaches require different approaches to measuring.
Mm-hmm.
So what do we mean by this? One of the greatest examples is the difference between radio advertising and internet advertising. And let's just say an e-commerce site where somebody comes to your landing page and you are able, the salesperson is the landing page.
Right.
The store is the website. And you're buying ads and sending them straight to that, as opposed to brick and mortar store. And we're with radio.
Yeah.
What's the difference that we've seen between radio?
Well, you certainly can't measure click-through rate on a radio station.
You cannot.
It's just hard to click on radio. Again, radio is an impression-based, right? It's the only way you can measure an actual radio campaign in terms of action taken is if you're doing a direct response type of radio ad, where it's like, do this by this time, mention this ad, call this specific phone number, one of those kinds of approaches. But so much of radio is about branding. It's about awareness. It's about building up impressions in the mind of your customer so that when they're ready to do something that involves the product or service you're offering, they know who you are, right? That's a pretty hard thing to measure, other than anecdotally, are people knowing who you are more and more? Is your traffic growing? Is your, traffic into your store growing? All of those kinds of things. So it's a very different, first of all, goal. So understanding what's the goal of the particular marketing medium.
Yeah.
And then how do you assess sort of the results of that goal that actually corresponds with the medium? And you're not asking it to do things that can't be done.
Yeah. There are people who listening, and people we talk to on a regular basis, who assume that because you can't measure radio as well, that it must be a poor investment.
Yeah.
And what we've seen over and over again is in some markets with some products and services, it is a poor way of doing it. Something that's an e-commerce store, that is a national store, it's much more difficult. And it probably isn't going to be as cost effective. If you're a local company or a regional company, radio is still making people millionaires with a huge amount of their budget put into radio, because it has a cumulative effect that builds up. But it takes a while.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a while to warm up ads and get the ads dialed in online, social ads or anything like that. But those we can look at the metrics every day. We can look at the metrics every week, and we can tweak it more. Mm-hmm. Radio takes longer, but the potential impact for radio is a much broader impact and potentially a much stronger impact.
Yep.
And we have seen it very successful in even things like healthcare, right? We've gone into cities where we've just done stuff that doctors have services that help people that insurance doesn't cover.
Yeah.
It's cash-based. You go in, we've been in 20 plus cities in the United States just for medical stuff and working those markets, and radio kills.
Mhm.
And even newspaper used to kill when there were newspapers.
When people were physically printing newspapers,
It
which
was
happens a little
It was
now,
really
but not
funny.
as much.
But that was just 14 years ago.
Mhm.
14 years ago, all of that was working. Now, what we know is from the statistics, there's still a lot of people listening to radio in a lot of markets, which is really interesting.
Mhm.
And it has dropped, but it's leveled out a lot. And so there's still an impact there and a cost. So when we look at that, you're going, okay, you need to understand that different marketing approaches require different approaches to measuring. And if we were going to succinctly put it, if I have a brick and mortar or a service-based business in an area, in a town, and I'm using radio, I'm waiting 4, 6, 9 months for things to start 6 to 9 months for things to start warming up. I'm measuring it at an annual, and I'm starting to look at traffic, and I'm actually looking at the register. How many times are people calling? But how is the gross revenue growing?
Yep.
And I'm looking at an annual basis, and you have to think about it that way. On an ad basis, digital ads, you're looking at on a monthly basis and maybe a quarterly basis, but you're looking at that going, is this working? But we're doing testing on a weekly basis and tweaking and shading things out. So the question here is, knowing that there is a difference, and then knowing what your industry, what your company, where you are, what are the most critical things to measure for the marketing or advertising efforts you're doing.
Yep.
Okay.
Good.
The fourth thing, the final thing, and this is probably when you deal with the first of knowing how the psychology and how people move from strangers to raving fans, and you make sure that you're choosing the metrics that actually are good metrics to choose. And then you're actually understanding that not the same model isn't the same for every business. So there's enough nuances there. Then you're looking at the whole concept of understanding that your metrics tell a story. And that if you can learn to listen to that story, it also you realize that your marketing is a conversation where the customer, especially even digitally, they're talking to you and you can listen and respond back. And your metrics is an ability to actually hear what they're saying.
Okay, so tell me a little bit more about that, because that feels very abstract.
All right, I want you to think about being on a phone call, and it's something that's so ubiquitous in our society that we don't even think about the amazing technology of the telephone.
I do love the word ubiquitous.
Do you like it?
I do. I do.
Ubiquitous. So what happens is you call me, I pick up the phone, and you're talking, and this piece of electronics in your hand is actually taking your voice, it's interpreting it into digital signals, takes analog, turns it into digital, it sends it over this amazing system that probably goes to a satellite, comes back to my phone, and then turns it into a voice that I understand that sounds like you and repeats everything that you said.
Actually is me.
And it's like, and we think about it so normally now that it's like, well, I'm talking to you. Well, yeah. I'm talking to a representation of you.
Oh.
And think about metrics that way. When you do something, the metrics that you're choosing are, especially on a computer, they're measuring that. There's somebody there taking all that information, those actions, those behaviors, just like we were talking on the phone, those actions or behaviors that you're taking on your website or whatever, looking at something on Google, clicking on something on Google, deciding if that was what you thought it was, and you stayed there at that website because that's what you were looking for. You're like, no, this is not what I'm looking for. It turns out I thought this was a HVAC company in Oroville, California, and it turns out it's in Oroville, Washington, which is near the Canadian border. I learned that last week.
They are not going to help your house.
Like all of a sudden, it's like, I'm in the wrong spot. This is not going to, I got to go back over. It could be as simple as that.
Yeah.
Right? Oh, sorry, wrong place. Because the internet will let you do that quickly. So then it's measuring, and now I'm getting feedback, except we've learned to translate. The phone makes it so much easier because it translates it exactly into what it would be like in a real life situation. Metrics don't really do that. They turn it into a code that you have to decipher. And so, for instance, if my click-through rate on my ad is a good click-through rate for that industry, let's just say 3% of the people who see my ad click on it. That's pretty good. I like more than 1%. 1%.
Don't we all?
If it's under 1%, that's not good enough. But 1 to 7%, there's kind of like your good, acceptable to amazing on an ad. Now, how do I know if all those people are actually people who are the right people to see the ad, or they're clicking on the wrong thing? Because we wrote a poor ad. We wrote an ad that was very attractive, but it turns out that it didn't
attract the right people.
Right? So I measure over on the website how many people stick around on the first thing I measure is how many people come to our website. And then the second thing I measure is how many people stay for 10 seconds or more than 10 seconds. If they leave within 10 seconds, then there is a good chance that I'm attracting people that when they get to the website and they find out what we are, what it is, what we offer, what we're talking about, where we're located, any of those things, they go, oh, that's not me. That's not what I was looking for. And they leave. Mm-hmm. It's like having a storefront where people keep walking and they think, well, let's take our store, our office. There's a medical facility in the parking lot next door. And
we have the misfortune of being 680 Rio Lindo and they are 680 Cohasset. We have big sign that says 680. They have very poor signage. If I had a nickel.
And even though we have a sign, I'm looking for, and we have all these people, especially before we had bigger signs on our outside our door. People like, is this the medical facility? Is this? No, it's not. It's not the medical facility. And it happened over and over and over again. Those people don't stay and they're like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm in the wrong spot. And they leave.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff. You're like, wait a minute, what's going on? I can't do anything about the signage. Really. We've done as much as we can. But in an ad, you can start to realize, oh, we've got a great click-through rate, but not a great stay rate. Mm-hmm. Or we have a great click-through rate and people are staying longer than 10 seconds. That means that what they thought they were clicking on is they're getting something. So now they're looking. Do they actually look at the entire page? Because every time somebody walks in to your store, they might walk in, look around 5 or 6 feet and leave. And the store is a 4,000 square foot store. On a website, you might have this long page and all this stuff you're talking about. You put all this work into your website to talk about your products and your services. And they look at the top and they scroll down just a little bit and then they don't.
And then they see your face and they're like, I'm out.
I'm out. I'm gone. So now what's the story being told? The story is, it could be one of confusion or they're in the right place. It's a story of, is something wrong with, why do people walk in and then all of a sudden they look around and they leave quickly? Do they feel uncomfortable? Is it something? Did I not communicate well?
Mm-hmm. Did I overwhelm them? Is it cluttered?
All that the kind questions, of stuff, right? And there's all this stuff that we do in stores, and then people watch actual physical brick and mortar stores. And that's the best illustration I can think of is you can start to see when people are behaving in ways that look like, are you uncomfortable? Mm-hmm. What's weird? Why are you
I just have these visions of moments when I know that I need a specific item of clothing. And I've done something like TJ Maxx. And I can remember physically like walking in and looking and being like, oh, heck no. Like I cannot manage this. Like I need to go somewhere that's got much smaller racks, a whole lot less options, and doesn't require more space in between the racks. Less I'm out. It's that. So you're talking about that kind of reaction that happens online as well, right?
And if you're sitting there watching in the store, the metrics are what allow you to see those things. How do you interpret? Because there's a story being told. The customers are communicating, and then you can start to go, oh, when you see that there's a pattern in the way people think and process in real life, there's a pattern in which they process and think online, and you understand that. So part of it is knowing, you have to believe this last point that is the biggest one, I think, is understanding that there is a story being told, that the numbers are different ways. It's like your extension of your senses. There are different ways to see, listen, hear, touch. The numbers are allowing you that kind of connectivity. And then you have to learn, how do I understand the story? So when you take all these 4 things together, especially in the digital world, so you start with number 1, what moves people from being strangers to raving fans? Mm-hmm. How's their behavior? Okay, so I've got behavior of people online. And then I've got, different products and services and industries are important because of the way I advertise and communicate. There's gonna be differences there. And then there's going to be differences based on whether I used a Facebook ad or a Google ad, or I'm using social media, organic social media, and I'm trying to influence people there, which again, organic social media is a lot like radio. It's the same concept. It takes a lot longer to get an impact. And yet we all know that based on the stories of influencers and all kinds of stuff, that you can have a huge impact, but you have to go about it differently.
Yep.
You can't just be transactional like you are in an ad. And then all of a sudden you take all that and you go, okay, there's a story going on. And numbers are going to help me do that. The first step is understanding all that can really be helpful. Second is now learning what are those things. Doing some reading, doing some studying, reading some good books, understanding what it looks like and how that all works, and finding a company that can actually help you with understanding measurements. I mean, I think one of the best companies out there for at least marketers and people who are going to be more serious about it is Measurement Marketing, owned by Chris Mercer. And we're friends with Chris, which don't even call him Chris. He's Mercer, goes by Mercer, because there were too many Chris's in school growing up. And he has done a phenomenal job of articulating the story and how the story works. And thinking about different ways that the numbers can tell you different things. And then how do you optimize or tweak or change? Because you're responding. It's almost a conversation.
Yeah. Well, and I think I have lots of memories of reporting meetings with clients and how often you had to retell them the story of the numbers because the story they read on their own and interpreted wasn't anywhere near close, because they're not close to that kind of stuff. So part of working with a professional company who understands the metrics and the numbers and what's actually happening there is you actually are able to get the right story, as opposed to overlaying an interpretation that perhaps is going to be detrimental, cause you to either keep doing something you shouldn't, or stop doing something that's actually working because you don't know how to read the data.
And this whole entire podcast, really the significant point we're trying to get across is that we know marketing is important. Measurement is a critical aspect in marketing, and there is a way to do it well, and there's a way to do it not well, and it can be understood. And if you dig into these 4 things and realize what they are and re-listen to this, there is a whole new world that can open up where you're making more money, wasting less money, and you're less frustrated because you have more clarity and understanding.
Yeah.
And when that happens, your life is better and business is better.